Welcome to all Caribbean entrepreneurs. If you've been ready and waiting to take your business digital and get paid online while you sip something strong on the beach, this podcast is for you. We'll hear from the Caribbean's finest entrepreneurs on topics like e-commerce, business development, brand building, social media, their wins and failures. This is the only place in the region helping you navigate the digital age from the Caribbean's perspective. This is Digipreneur FM. And now, let's give it up for the Digiboss himself, Mr. Karan Rose.
Thank you to everybody tuning in to another episode of the Digipreneur FM podcast. And as usual, it is your boy, Mr. Rose. Woo-hoo. DJ, you gotta fade us all the way out because we gotta talk to the people. It is September 13th, 2022. We are at episode 101. Lord, this is going to be, that's so long to say, 100, so long to say, but you know what? We're here. We love it. 100. This is the 101st episode. All right. How are you lovely people in the Digipreneur FM family doing all across the world? How are you doing? We got to do a nice little roll call. Like I was taking a look at the countries who have been listening to the Digipreneur FM podcast for the month of September so far. And, you know, shout outs to Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is the largest audience of the podcast. And this month, the country that has been downloading the podcast episodes in second place is Cyprus. Cyprus has moved up. My goodness. Listen, I keep on saying, if you guys see me in Cyprus, you guys know exactly why. Cyprus is the second, the country that has been downloading the podcast, second most. You know, third, we got the United States, Argentina, Panama, then Jamaica, right? Canada, Barbados, what's going on? We have been getting a good bit of downloads from the Ukraine. So they're taking their time out, you know, with what's going on over there. And they've been listening to the podcast as well. Shout outs to everybody in the Ukraine listening to the podcast. Italy, the Cayman Islands, El Salvador, Ireland, Haiti, United Arab Emirates, Fiji, Spain, Egypt, Bermuda, Australia, South Africa. My goodness. Listen to me, man. When you make your content, when you make things like your podcasts, when you blog, I find podcasting and blogging gets you the most international audience. Typically, when you're looking at your social media platforms, unless you're some celebrity content creator, when you look at your audience, when you look at your analytics on social media, they tend to predominantly be in your home country. Like if you look at TikTok, we know right now TikTok has been, you know, giving away organic reach, right? TikTok has been giving away organic reach, but 90+% of the audience, when you look at your analytics on TikTok, is all from your exact country. And that's just how the algorithms are set up, all right? When you look at your Instagram, again, predominantly the views are coming from your country, all right? LinkedIn is a bit better. I find LinkedIn does give you a nice international reach over on that platform. But again, that platform is just set up very, very differently than almost any other platform. But you see, when it comes to your website, creating content via your blogs, creating content on your podcast, because these things, you know, they have their own algorithms. They're indexed by the Google search engines, so people from all over the world can, you know, do a Google search and your content can pop up or link to your your blog or a link to your pod. These things are just shown, all over the world. They're shown all over the world. So whenever I take a look at the podcast data and I look at the downloads, when I see the countries that are downloading the episodes for the podcast, and we're not just talking one, we're not just talking 10, like you're talking some good downloads, right? You're talking some good downloads that it's not just a one-off. When I see a country that has like one download, I'm like, okay, that whoever listened from that country could have potentially downloaded in error, or they just listened to that one episode and said, okay, nah, this ain't for me. But when you see a country like a Fiji, where there's 30 downloads for the month, you're like, okay, somebody in Fiji or a couple of people in Fiji, they've downloaded some episodes, and 30 could be on the low end, depending on the size of your channel, how many downloads you're getting a month. 30 could be on the low end, right? But the point is, if you see 30 downloads coming from Fiji, you know that there is somebody in Fiji or there's people in Fiji actively downloading your episode, right? It's not just a one-off where you see a country and it's just one download and you're like, okay, that could have been an error, right? Or somebody could have listened and said, nah, this ain't for me. When you're seeing, 10 plus, 20 plus, 50 plus, 100 plus, that there's people in that country downloading, listening to your podcast. So big shout outs to everybody that has been tuning into the Digipreneur FM podcast all across the world. Again, always amazing to see where the content is going. And it's just very different from when I look at the data on social media. And I encourage you, look at your own social media analytics. Pay attention to the countries that are watching your content, because if you're predominantly seeing all of it is in the country that you reside in, how else are you going to get your message out to the world? How are you going to build that international brand? And I mean, many of us are striving to do that. Many of us are striving to build that brand that goes beyond the shores of our respective countries, because we want to expand. We want to create opportunities that are not just limiting ourselves within our borders. And the good thing with the digital age that we live in today, it doesn't matter what industry you are in. You could be a Pokemon card collector, and you could be tapping into, markets around the world and connecting with other Pokemon card collectors. There's Pokemon card conventions, and you could be getting flown in to go and speak or to go participate in one of those conventions in another part of the world. But people have to find you and see what you're all about in order to do that. So again, take a look at your social media analytics. Look and see, are you only getting seen? Is your content only being viewed in your respective country? And if it is, start looking at things like starting a podcast or creating a blog. It's going to expand your reach, and it's going to, open you up to a new audience. And I say all of that to say that today's episode is, should you start a podcast in 2022? Should you start a podcast in 2022? My answer to that is yes. And I'm going to be giving you 7 reasons why you should start a podcast in 2022. Now, there's a lot more, but, I try to keep my podcast, to 60 minutes or less. But I have 7 reasons as to why you should start a podcast. So what I want to do is I first want to start off with some podcast stats, right? Just to give you guys, podcasting is just so very different from any other medium, from any other type of content. It's very different from video content. It's very different from the social media content that you put out there. And it's very different from blogging. I really and truly believe that podcasting is the most powerful of all the content types. I truly believe that. And I believe that because, well, I'll get into the 7 reasons, and as I get into it, you will see my reasoning for it. But to me, of all the mediums, It's one where there's so much upside because people are not taking advantage of it, or because it hasn't been saturated, like a social media or any of the social media platforms, right? If you're in the Caribbean, then you still have blogging. Blogging hasn't reached the potential, like in other, or hasn't reached the saturation or the potential like in some of the other markets, because blogging has, been around for so long. It's super saturated in places like the United States. It's saturated in places like the United Kingdom. But in places like the Caribbean, each individual country where, the majority of, businesses or people just don't have websites, we have a very low amount of websites coming out of each individual Caribbean island. And because, remember, Google and Bing and all the search engines are constantly looking for websites to index to display information, the only way they get information is from websites, indexing websites. And because we have a low amount of websites coming from the Caribbean, there's not much Caribbean information that's being populated on the internet. Everybody's running to social media, and they've, saturated the hell out of it, right? So it's much, much harder to grow on social media because social media has just made it easy to just put content out there. But it's not as simple to, put out content via your website and, learn things like search engine optimization so you can get indexed. Podcasting, requires a bit more work than just posting on social media. And again, in the Caribbean, it's untapped potential. Untapped potential. So let me get started with just, let me show you guys some podcasting stats, right? There's a platform called Buzzsprout. They're one of the top podcasting platforms on the market right now, and they usually publish reports every single month about the landscape of podcasting, right? And they're the biggest. They are the biggest podcasting host. So they have they publish the data that happens on their platform, but they are the largest podcasting host, right? So for the month of August, they had over 118 million downloads for the month of podcasts. They had over 118 million downloads of podcasts that happen on the Buzzsprout platforms. Remember, there's a bunch of podcast hosts. Buzzsprout is just the biggest. So these are stats that are coming from their platform, right? So over 118 million downloads happened on that platform in that last month. There was over 170,000 new episodes that got published for that month. Now, when you think about, how many blogs, how many pieces of YouTube videos or TikTok videos that get published every single day, you understand the saturation that happens over on social media, right? But again, 170,000 new episodes, that's really low, right? Competition is very low on the podcasting platform, but the thirst for podcasting content is growing, right? And we'll get into that. On the Buzzsprout platform, there's currently 114,000 active podcasts right now, all right? All right, let's look at the podcast directories. Podcast directories being things like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Castbox, places where people listen to podcasts, right? The top place that people go to listen to podcasts right now is Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is the largest podcast app or podcast directory that people go to listen to podcasts. And their market share on Buzzsprout was at 37%. So there was 44, if I'm reading this correctly, that is 44 million, over 44 million downloads happened on the Apple Podcast platform. Followed second by Spotify with over 32 million podcast episodes. And in third place was over 3 million podcast downloads happening via the web browser. People actually going to either a podcast website or like you guys know, I have the digipreneur.fm website. So you don't have to download Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Podcasts to listen to the episodes. You can actually go to digipreneur.fm and listen to the podcast episodes there. So in third place, people were listening to the podcasts from web browsers, and then in fourth was Google Podcasts, and it goes down from there, right? The number one country in the world that listens to podcasts is the United States, followed by the United Kingdom. Then you have devices. The top devices that people tend to listen to podcasts on is iPhones. Second is Android devices. And fourth place is, I skipped third because third is unknown. Fourth place is Windows computers. And then fourth is, not fourth. What is that? That's fifth. Apple computers, right? Now, let's take a look at some other interesting data on podcasts. So, within the first 7 days, right, we're looking at how many downloads tend to happen within the first 7 days. So, the top 1% of podcasts get over 4,600 downloads within the first 7 days. That's the top 1% of podcasts. You are in the top 5% of podcasts if you get over 900 downloads within the first 7 days. The top 10% of podcasts is 373 downloads within the first 7 days. The top 25% of podcasts get at least 100 downloads within the first 7 days. And the top 50% of podcasts, so the average, gets 29 downloads for the first 7 days. Now, you might not be thinking that, 29 downloads is not a lot, but you have to keep in mind, right? When you're making these podcasts and you make, again, this to me is the best long form content because people can, put the podcast on and they could do something else. It's the most intimate of all it's the most intimate of all content types. And what I mean by intimate is somebody can leave their house on their commute to work, put you on in the car, and you can keep them company all throughout their journey through traffic. That's why I really don't mind. I love to do podcast episodes that are, that hit that hour mark. Because when you think about it, there are people who are stuck in traffic for a minimum of 1 hour a day. And that's just one way. A minimum of 1 hour a day. People are stuck in traffic. And you could be that person who keeps them company throughout the entire journey. There are people who hit me up and they're like, yo, I listen to you on the way to work. I listen to you on the way from work. You think about people in the gym. People in the gym might jump on the treadmill and put you on and listen to you for their 30-minute cardio session. Not everybody's listening to music in the gym, There are people who have their headphones on, and rather than listen to music now, they're listening to podcasts. You could be, if they're in the gym for an hour, if they're in the gym for 2 hours, your podcast could be the one giving them, you could be in their ears while they're working out. Think about when people are cooking, when they're doing laundry, when they're doing chores. People are turning on podcasts over other forms of content or music or things like that, right? People are figuring out, or they're trying to find ways. How do I edify myself? How do I keep myself educated whilst I'm doing other things as well, and allowing that to soak into my subconscious? So even when you are if you're in the top 50% and you're getting 29 downloads in that first 7 days, those are 29 people who you have given, you've assisted on their way to work or in the gym, and they've listened to your 1 hour podcast on whatever the topic is. I seen, like, when I first got started, I remember seeing there was a blog and they were talking about podcast downloads. The numbers are so much lower when you think about TikTok. You make a good TikTok video, and people 1,000 people like your TikTok video, right? But your TikTok video, for the most part, is less than 3 minutes, less than 60 seconds. Some people are, less than 10-second videos. TikTok was testing out 10-minute videos. So let's just say the max is 10-minute videos, right? But nobody's really holding their, well, I can't say nobody, but I know I'm not watching 10-minute videos on TikTok. I might watch I watch 3-minute videos because I'm holding my phone. It's vertical. So I would watch a 3-minute video. But after that, I'm like, long form content on TikTok for me just doesn't really make sense because I'm usually holding my phone and watch TikTok. When I watch a YouTube video, I might watch a YouTube video on my computer, my iPad, the TV, something like that, where I'm in a position to watch long form content. But I'm not always in a position to watch long form content, right? I tend to watch long form content when I'm, eating breakfast, or if I'm doing dishes, and I'll set my iPad up right there and I'll put something on. I'll wash dishes and watch it, right? But I'm in more positions to listen to podcasts than I am to, read blogs or watch YouTube videos or watch social media content. So 29 people listen to your content for an hour. That's pretty good, right? Moving on. This is another big question. People are constantly, wondering, how long should a podcast episode be, right? And 31%, so the largest duration for podcasts, 31% are between 20 and 40 minutes. That's the largest amount of, that's the largest duration of podcasts. 20 to 40 minutes, 31%, followed by 21% is 40 to 60 minutes. In third place, 17% of podcasts are over 60 minutes. And then tied at 15% apiece is 10 to 20 minutes and less than 10 minutes. So again, it shows you the long form content people want. 20 to 40 minutes, 31%. 21% 40 to 60 minutes, and then 17% over 60 minutes. And then keep in mind that the most popular podcast in the world right now, Joe Rogan's podcast, is like over 3 hours in length. All right? So as long as the content is good on podcasts, people are going to listen. And remember, podcasts is just a very versatile medium. So they're going to be in more positions to listen to a podcast versus any other form of content. And then when we talk about, and then again, another popular question that people get asked, and I'm giving you guys the data on it, is, how often should podcasts be published? And the publishing schedule for 39% of podcasts are between 8 to 14 days. So, 8 to 14 days. Let's just say, 2 weeks people are publishing. The most common publishing schedule is 8 to 14 days. That's 39%. Now, I don't like that. I find that's too long. But again, this doesn't matter what I like. This is the data, right? 39% are publishing podcasts every 8 to 14 days, followed by 34%, which is every 3 to 7 days. So I tend to do that. I publish every 3 to 7 days because I put out, I do my best to put out 2 podcasts a week. So there's usually, a couple of days in between. So every 3 to 7 days is 34%, followed by 19% every 15 to 29 days. All right. And then 7% is publishing podcasts every 0 to 2 days. They're publishing content, right? Via the podcasting channel. So, excuse me. Oh my. Yeah. That is that's some key data surrounding podcasts, right? Podcasts also have the highest consumption rate of any content, of any piece of content in the world right now. Podcasts have the highest consumption rate with over 82% completion. So when you think about all the different types of content on the market, podcasting has the highest completion or consumption rate at over 82%. So somebody presses play, and they finish over 82% of the entire podcast episode. So these are key things to keep in mind. The key things to keep in mind when you're doing video content. TikTok introduces where you can see, the completion rate, the average watch time. Even if you're getting the likes, doesn't necessarily mean people are actually watching your content. They're not consuming it from start to finish. Podcasting has the highest consumption rate of any form of media, right? So let me get into the 7 reasons why you should be podcasting in 2022. So reason number 1 is that people can hear the passion about you talking about the topic. People can hear the passion when you are speaking about a topic. Now, you can get this through video as well. And video allows you to, people can see you, right? People can see you on camera. They can hear you. You can be expressive. You can create good video content. But not everybody is good on camera, right? Not everybody is good on camera. Not everybody is creating, really good quality video. So it can take away from you. But guess what? There are people that have, the content is amazing, their voice is amazing, but the video might not be that good, or they just don't look good on video. So the thing with podcasting is that people can still hear that passion in your voice, and it takes away, you don't necessarily have to be on video for podcasting. You could have an amazing podcast, and some of the most popular content creators are podcasters, and they don't do video. But people can still hear the passion in your voice through podcast. And the good thing is that people don't necessarily have to look at you with an audio-only podcast. They can just press play, listen to you in the headphones, put you on in the car, and just listen to you. They don't have to see you, right? But they can still hear your voice. They can still hear and feel the passion. And to me, I love that because I tend to record podcasts in the wee hours of the morning. So as of right now, it is 4:55 in the morning in Trinidad and Tobago right now. And you have to keep in mind that I'm already almost 30 minutes into the podcast. All right. So I tend to record all of my podcast episodes between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., depending on what time I get up or depending on how my morning routine, came out. Or depending on how my morning routine happened that morning. I tend to record my podcast between 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. So when you hear my energy, when you hear my vibe, understand that this is me at 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. This is me, right? And I love the fact that I don't have to go on video. I do a lot of video, but the video will happen whenever it happens. And not every day I want to be on video. But podcasting, I could do a podcast every day if I wanted to. Podcasting is a lot easier for me to do. But again, you got to plan out your topics, and podcasting is something where if it's just you, if it's a solo cast. Now, I do both. I predominantly do a solo podcast, and I'll also interview people as well on the podcast, but I predominantly do solo podcasts. So you need to be able to speak about your topic, at whatever duration that you decide for your podcast. You need to be able to speak about it in whatever length you are doing your podcast on. So I know that whatever the topic is that I pick, I can speak about that topic for at least an hour. At least 1 hour can I speak about that topic. So while I could do content, while I could do podcasts every single day, I don't, because I want to ensure that whatever topic I'm doing for the episode, I want to ensure that I at least speak about it at least for an hour, because I like the long form podcast. Now, I could do short form podcasts, right? Like if I wanted to record a podcast episode, let's just say if I wanted to do 5 days a week, I could do it. Because, for example, I'm doing 7 reasons to do a podcast episode, right? I could do content buckets weekly. I could say, yo, this week we're talking about podcasting, and every single day, like I said, I'm doing 7 reasons. I could do a reason every single day and do 5 to 10 minute episodes around one reason every single day, and I could put out content every single day. And it doesn't mean that I have to record every day. I could batch create. I could create 7 audio files and upload and create 7 podcast episodes around each reason, upload them, scheduling, and then every single day you had a podcast episode, and it would just be shorter form content, right? But I prefer to do the 1 hour, the long form content. I prefer to do the 60-minute episodes because I get to be with you for an hour, and I get to be with you on your commutes, you're working, you're working out, whatever. I like that. That's my preference, right? So yeah, people can hear about they can hear the passion when you're talking about it. It's a great long form piece of content that you get to do, versus social media. And when people talk about, people having shorter attention spans, to me, short attention spans is on social media. We have a short attention span on social media. But on podcasts, it has the highest consumption rate. So people are listening to long form pieces of content. And like I said, 31% of podcasts are between 20 and 40 minutes. That's long form content, right? YouTube videos are catered for more long form content. And when you look at some of your favorite YouTube creators, they're creating long form videos on there. Over 15 minutes. So much of the content that I watch from, people that, I'm watching on YouTube, the majority of their content is over 14 minutes. It's always between 10 and say 30 minutes on average. If it's like, workshops that I'm watching, it could be an hour and I'm going to watch it. All right. But I'm not watching, I don't really watch long form video on social media. Social media for me is really quick. I might click on a link and read the blog because again, a blog doesn't take you no more than 2 minutes to get through the entire thing if it's a long blog. But we would tend to skim through blogs and read what we want to read. And if it's really interesting, we go back and reread the rest. All right. So anyways, that's number 1. People can hear the passion about the topic. Number 2 is passive consumption. So I've been talking a bit about that in previous points or in earlier parts of the episode. But podcasting is the only content medium that allows for passive consumption, meaning people can do other things while listening to you. No other form of content allows for that to happen. Not video, not blogs, typically not social media content because you really got to watch what's going on the social media content for you to understand what's happening. And people create the video content or they create the images. Again, you have to watch it, right? So podcasting, people can press play and they can binge your content because after one episode finishes, they can listen to another episode. I love when people reach out to me and they're like, yo, I listened to 2-3 episodes of your podcast at work. They just play one after the next. And by the time 2 or 3 episodes is done, that's 3 hours of my day finished. And I've just been listening to good, helpful content throughout the entire day. So for you, what you should be doing, it doesn't matter what your industry is, what you should do, right, is jump on Google and type in your industry. So let's just say I type in barber podcasts, right? Barber podcast. So shout outs to my cousin Antonio. I know my cousin has been listening to the podcast and getting some good information. Shout outs to Antonio Figaro over at Crew Cut. Shout out to the Crew Cuts family. Large up anytime. Type in something like barber podcast, right? And look at that. I type in barber podcast, and just when you think that, all content for something like barbering has to be video because people have to see it. Yo, look at how many barber podcasts there is. Teal and Barber podcast, the Barber Session podcast, Zero Gapped podcast, I Do It Barber podcast, the Barber Game, Philosophy of the Barber, Barber College, the Forge Barber, Barbershop, Talk Like in This, Barberpreneur podcast, How to Cut It in the Hairdressing Industry podcast, the Clipper Dons Radio podcast. Yo, I didn't even know that there were so many barber podcasts on the market. Now, here's the thing. I know none of these barber podcasts are from the Caribbean. I know that. So just imagine you are creating your barber podcast and you're in the Caribbean and there's nobody else talking about the barbering industry, the barbering game in the Caribbean. So what I would recommend you to do, if you're a barber, listen, go type in barber podcasts on Google. Listen to a couple of these barbering podcasts, right? Listen to the topics that they are talking about. Listen to the angles that they are coming with. Listen to the perspective that they are bringing. And start thinking to yourself, yo, what can I bring to the table in the industry? Look at this. Look at this. The art of manliness. Wow, there's so many. Barber College Success, the Barbers podcast, the Better Barber. Wow, there's so many different ones. So listen to a couple of the podcast episodes. Look at the topics that they're talking about. Look at the angles that they're bringing, the perspectives. That could also help you become a better barber. But then think about it as, yo, everybody and their mother who is a barber right now is creating social media content. Start thinking about, yo, how can I become one of the leaders in the barber industry? Let me create a podcast. Let me create that movement. You could be the place where other barbers are coming to sit down and talk to you about the industry. And you start to build that community. And other people are going to be listening in. So now you're going to be creating other opportunities because, yo, when conventions are happening, when other things outside of actually just cutting the hair, when other things are happening within industry, internationally, people could be listening to your content. And remember, like I said, when I look at all of my content, so when I look at the downloads happening for my podcast, look at that. The top 5 countries, only one of them is in the Caribbean. Only one is Trinidad and Tobago. That's right. As of right now, the top Caribbean country listen to my podcast is Trinidad and Tobago. The other 4 in the top 5 are Cyprus, United States, Argentina, and Panama. So if you create a podcast and you're getting all these downloads from other parts of the world, you can start creating an international community. And when other events and conventions and these things are happening, you're gonna get called. You're gonna have people reaching out to you. They're going to be reaching out to you, whether it's in support, whether, they're going to be reaching out to you to say, yo, I want to learn. Do you have an online school? Or, hey, we have this upcoming competition. We want to bring you in. Or, hey, we want you to be a judge. We love your content. We know that we know that you know what you're talking about. We want you to be a judge. Or, hey, come out to this convention. You're one of the leaders. You're one of the G's in the industry. All right? Your podcast, because it's long form content, is going to force you to become it's going to force you to, again, create long form content, and you're going to be seen as a leader in the space. You're going to be positioning yourself as a thought leader, right? Short form social media content does not position you as a thought leader. It just doesn't. Your short form content should be leading people towards long form content. And that is how you position yourself as a thought leader. But if all you have is short form social media content, that doesn't position you as a thought leader. It might show that you can do the job, but it doesn't position you as a thought leader. So your short form content should always be pushing people to long form content if you want to be seen as one of the leaders in your industry. So whatever your industry is, type in your industry and then type in podcasts. And then you're going to see all the different types of podcasts. Listen to the perspectives, listen to the angles that they are bringing, and see if, you can start that podcast and start bringing your perspectives. We are in the Caribbean, folks. We have our own unique style, our own unique take, our own unique problems, our own unique perspectives. We have a lack of content. We have a bunch of social media content from random content creators, and this is no disrespect to them, but we have a lot of skits and comedy. We have a lot of that. We don't really have many thought leaders in different industries creating content to push our industries forward, and that is what we need more of. All right. The third reason to create a podcast in 2022 is the ease of use to create the podcast. Podcasting is one of the easiest content types to create. When you are blogging, you need a website, or you got to go and sign up on medium.com. And remember, you don't own medium.com. It's a platform, but you can start to write. Writing, blogging, mainly you do it on your website, or you got to go and sign up on a Medium, write out the content, get it out there, right? With video requires you to have a good camera. Good video requires you to actually create good video, right? And the reason why people have so many second doubts with video is because you're using a bad camera. You're using a bad smartphone. The video doesn't look good, or you don't find you don't find it's looking good, or you don't find you are looking good on the video. So there's a lot more barriers or things to think about when it comes to video content, right? But with podcasting, you really just need a microphone. You can go and purchase a USB microphone for your phone and record a podcast episode on your phone, and just get a cheap mic. And that's as easy as you could start out. You could start out by just getting a USB-C mic, or a Lightning, if you have an iPhone, a Lightning mic, a lapel mic that clips on, and just use your phone recorder and just record the episode and upload it to the podcast. So that's how easy it is to start a podcast. That's all you need. At that point, once you start with that, at that point, you're just refining your audio. So like I have a Rodecaster Pro. It's like a mixing board, and it does all of the audio engineering and whatnot, sound effect, but it does a bunch of stuff. But I didn't start with that. Microphone, I have a Audio-Technica 2100X microphone with an XLR cable, so you're getting really good quality on that. And even that, like I'm getting to the point where by the end of the year, I'm going to upgrade my microphone, because I'm just at this point. Again, when you go beyond just your smartphone and a microphone connected to your and I wouldn't use the headsets that come with your phone. Like actually just go and buy a cheap USB-C or Lightning microphone, because those are better quality mics than the headset mics that you get. But even if you have an iPhone and you're using Apple AirPods, those tend to get some good quality too to record audio, right? So even if you start with that, at that point you're just refining the audio quality. So when I upgrade my microphone, I'm going to upgrade to a Shure SM7B. When I upgrade my Rodecaster, it's going to be upgrading to the Rodecaster Pro 2. And I'm just refining the audio quality. I'm refining, my workflow and processes and things like that. But, at the end of the day, you don't need all of these fancy tools to create a podcast. It's one of the easiest forms of content media to create, because all you really need is a microphone and your smartphone and your app, your sound recorder, the app on your phone, just to get started, right? So it's easy to create a podcast. Number 4, the fourth reason to start a podcast in 2022 is interviews allow you can start to interview people, and they allow you to tap into bigger names in your industry. If you really want to start to build a name in your industry, you are able to create the podcast, and you're able to go and reach out to people who are bigger names than you in the business, and you can interview them. Get their insights. People People want to come on platforms and be interviewed. They want to tell their story. They want to share their tips. They want to be interviewed, right? All of that helps them with good PR, and especially because podcasting, they have their own algorithms. They are indexed by the search engines as well, so it helps them with their PR, because people are going to be able to search for, again, Barbering Podcasts. They can search for their name, and again, their interviews are going to show up on Google. They're going to show up in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There's a wide variety of places that podcasting shows up in search engines, and also every podcast directory has its own little bit of search engines and algorithms as well. So people, their names can show up. So it allows you to interview other industry experts, other people on the come up, and you can become that platform in your industry, and that's going to help with other people's PR. People are going to be able to search their names, and they're going to show up for the content, right? And that's just going to help build your name and build your brand as well. So that's another great reason why to start a podcast. It's going to help you to build your platform by tapping into other industry experts. People are going to know who you are. They're going to follow you. They're going to listen to the content. And again, it's going to help you build your name and your platform. The reason number five to start a podcast in 2022 is there's less competition than any other mediums, especially in the Caribbean. Listen, people are not creating blogs, they're not creating podcasts. Everybody is running down social media content, and right now everybody is running down TikTok. And people are getting on TikTok and not even creating any form of useful content for their industry. TikTok in the Caribbean right now is terrible in the form of just a lack of substance. It's a lack of substance. Everybody's getting on TikTok, and it's just trends. It's just trends. It's just escapism content, which is cool. Listen, again, no knock to anybody creating comedy skits, because I like to watch my comedy too. I like to laugh too. Not everything is business, but the point is that all the business, the majority of the businesses are not creating any form of substantial content. They're not podcasting. They're not blogging. When they do make videos on social media, it's just to advertise their product. Like, nobody is creating any form of substantial content. The content has no substance. So there's less competition than any other mediums with podcasting, especially in the Caribbean. And you could come out, you can create that cooking podcast, you could create that barbering podcast, you could create that sewing podcast, and there's just no other competition for you. When I look, so right now, this week I hit number one for all podcasts again in Trinidad and Tobago. Of all the podcasts in Trinidad and Tobago, I was number one again this week, right? And I've been able to hit number one for business category in Trinidad, number one for the entrepreneurship category in Trinidad, and I'm also charting on Dominica, Jamaica, Barbados as well, right? When I look at the other podcasts in entrepreneurship category, I'm in the top 10. I'm the only Caribbean podcast for Trinidad and Tobago. When I look at the business category for Trinidad and Tobago, I'm the only in the top 10. I was the only podcast in the entire Caribbean in the top 10. When I looked at the when I looked at, the category for all podcasts in the entire Caribbean, there was, let me see, because I don't want to lie to you, right? There was one other Caribbean podcast in the top 10, and that was Private Ryan. Everybody else was outside of the entire Caribbean. So we just have such a lack of competition in the Caribbean, especially when it comes to podcasts. But we are listening to them. Understand that we are consuming podcasts at a high rate. When I look at my podcast stats, like I said, Trinidad and Tobago, I'm in Trinidad, right? Trinidad is the number one country down on my podcast. A bunch of other Caribbean islands are listening, but I'm getting for the top five. The top five are typically other countries. So I'm getting listens, I'm getting that forward, I'm getting the downloads from other countries. So my name, my brand is being built in other countries. But other Caribbean islands are all listening to the content as well. All right. So less competition than any other mediums, especially in the Caribbean. And it's a great way to build your name, build your brand in a way where there's less competition. Right? If you've ever read the book Blue Ocean, right, you want to be where your competitors are not, and that's considered blue ocean. If you're only swimming in red ocean, that's where all of your competitors are. That's where everybody else is. It's much, much harder for you to establish yourself in a red ocean. It's going to take more money. It's going to take more creativity. And the reality is that when you are in a red ocean and you start to become more creative and you start to create new lanes for yourself, you start to swim in blue ocean because you start to create lanes for yourself where nobody else is swimming. And then that goes from red ocean to blue ocean. So podcasting is still blue ocean in the entire Caribbean. I suggest you get on that. Which brings me to number 6. It can expand your search potentials. Like I said earlier, podcasts do get indexed by the search engine. Google Podcasts is a part of Google, folks, so it does get indexed by the search engines. Apple Podcasts and a bunch of other platforms get indexed by the search engines, meaning when somebody types something in, you will see links to podcast episodes on Google Podcasts, on Listen Notes, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. They all get indexed by the search engines and they can show up. So it expands your search potential. People could be typing in your name or typing in a topic and they see a link to the podcast episode and they can go and listen to it, right? So it increases your search potential by creating podcast episodes. Remember, the vast majority of social media platforms are not indexed by the search engines, meaning people are not typing in a question or a query or something on the search engines and then a link to your specific post on LinkedIn shows up, right? The social media the social media platforms are not being indexed by the search engines. Your podcasts are. So it increases your search potential. People are going to search for something, see an episode for the podcast, click on it and listen to it, all right? And number 7, the 7th reason I'm going to give you guys to start a podcast in 2022 is it's going to create new streams of income for you. So because you're going to be expanding your search potential, it's going to be able to build a community, bring new people into your platform. If you're getting calls to go and speak, you can get paid to speak. If your podcast starts doing really well and other barbers or other people who are in the industry who create the clippers, who create the razors, other partners can come and say, yo, we want to sponsor episodes on your podcast. You are going to be able to create new streams of income. There's going to be other stakeholders in your industry that would love to work with you and sponsor episodes because their audience is your audience is their audience too. So if I'm a barber and Andis comes and says, yo, we want to sponsor episodes, that's because Andis knows they're getting in front of people who are listening to a barbering podcast. There's good alignment. So it's going to be able to create new streams of income for you that you were not able to do before that. All right. So those are my 7 reasons why you should create a podcast in 2022. Just to recap, number 1, people can hear the passion when you're talking about a topic. 2, passive consumption. People can do other things while listening to the podcast episode. 3, ease of use to create the podcast episode. All you really need is a microphone, your phone, and the sound recorder, or the sound recorder the sound recorder app on your phone, and that you can get started with. Anybody can get started with that podcast. Number 4, you can interview other industry experts, and that's going to allow you to build your name and build your platform. Number 5, there's less competition in any other medium and any other content type in the world, especially in the Caribbean. Number 6, it can expand your search potential. Podcasts are indexed by the search engines. People are going to jump on any of the search engines and your podcast episodes can show up. They can type something in and the title of the podcast shows up, especially if you are interviewing other popular people and people are Googling those other popular people. They're going to be able to see those podcast episodes come up, and it's a win-win for everybody involved, right? And number 7, you're able to create new streams of income. That's going to allow you to get things like, we want to sponsor episodes, we want to feature you, or we want to pay you to come and speak. You're going to be able to create new streams of income with your podcast episodes, right? So that is it for this episode, the 7 reasons to create a podcast in 2022. I hope this was definitely insightful for you guys. Speaking of creating new streams of income, folks, I just wanted to make an announcement that I have, since the pandemic started in 2022, because I've been creating, content around digital strategy, digital marketing, e-commerce, content marketing for so many years now. Since 2019, I've been going hard since 2019, right? In this industry. Everything really took off for me in 2020 because the pandemic hit, everything closed down. People are now trying to figure out how to do things digitally, right? And we're not going back to how things were. People are just trying to or smart businesses are trying to figure out, okay, I have my physical footprint. How do I expand digitally so that everything works together and I build that ecosystem, right? Smart businesses are doing that, and I'm seeing more smart people than people who are just denying digital, right? But as much as I have been speaking over the years at a bunch of virtual events, I've done virtual events in the UK, Australia, Canada, the States, almost every other Caribbean island at this point. I've finally got my first regional/international booking. I'm going to be flying out to the Bahamas tomorrow morning. I leave early tomorrow morning. I'm flying out to the Bahamas. I'm going to be speaking at one of the events for the Bahamas Business Week. They're flying me out there. I'm going to be doing a workshop on digital strategy for small business owners. I am super, super, super excited because, listen, I always say the first interview, the first TV interview, the first radio interview, the first interview in the press, the first customer. The first is always the hardest thing to get, and then everything else flows after that. So the fact that, this is the first time I'm being booked outside of the country, I'm being flown, I'm being paid, my tickets are being paid for, and I'm flying on my own merit. I'm not working for a company, and the company is, taking care of it. I'm flying on my own name, my own banner, and getting booked in another country, tickets paid, getting paid to speak, doing what I love, and doing what I've become so passionate about. And doing that as a part of the Bahamas Business Week. It is incredible. It is incredible. I am super excited to touch down in Bahamas, in Nassau, Bahamas. We're going to be at the Fusion Superplex. Lord have mercy. So the Bahamas Telecommunications business division is putting on their innovation masterclass series, and it's a part of the Bahamas Business Week, and it's going to be fun. But yeah, this is my first booking where I'm getting flown out, everything paid, in another country. And again, I always say that it's the first is the hardest to get. So this is the first time I'm being booked. Everywhere has opened back up. It's only been like, when I looked at the Bahamas, to enter the Bahamas, they only dropped their COVID restrictions to enter the country in. They dropped it in July. Same thing in Trinidad, right? So again, the countries They're now opening back up. Events are starting to happen. In-person events are starting to happen. This is my first one. I'm super, super excited. So there should be another podcast episode by the end of this week. I'm most likely going to pre-record it. And so when you hear the next one, it's most likely going to be pre-recorded. I shouldn't have said that. I should have just let you guys believe that, yo, this guy is still podcasting while he's in the Bahamas. Wait, this guy is good. I should, you know what? No, I'm not pre-recording it. I'm just joking. Definitely going to give you guys another episode before I leave for the Bahamas. But yeah, I'm super excited. Can you guys tell? Can you hear the passion in my voice? So anywho, so that's going to be dope. If you're not following me on social media, go follow me over at Keron Rose, KeronRosc. I'll be taking you guys along that journey, especially because it's Bahamas Business Week. So I'm going to be meeting a whole lot of other business minds who are being flown in from around the world as well and from other Caribbean islands. So, I'm going to be giving you guys behind the scenes content over on my Instagram stories, and I'll be posting clips here and there on LinkedIn and Facebook and whatnot, but my Instagram stories is really going to be the place to be because that's where I'm going to be sharing a bunch of the behind the scenes to the Bahamas Business Week, right? That's going to be really dope. So follow me over at social media at Keron Rose, KeronRosc. If you guys enjoyed today's episode, please rate the podcast, whether you're using Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Drop a rating on the podcast. They continue to help the podcast platform grow. And if you really enjoyed the podcast, please drop a review. I read all the reviews, and the reviews help me, ensure that we keep the podcast up to date, and I'm giving you guys exactly what you guys want. And if you guys have any suggestions for content that you guys want, definitely drop the review. Let me know what you guys are looking for, and I will definitely create that content for you guys. All right. Don't forget, if you want to learn more about building your digital presence and monetizing your platform, check out KeronRose.com. And to stay up to date on all things happening within the Digipreneur FM podcast, visit digipreneur.fm, the website. And you can subscribe to the notification list or subscribe to the email list. And we put out content. We keep you guys up to date. Those links to the websites will be in the show notes that you guys can click on as well. All right. That is it from me today, folks. Happy Tuesday. I gotta go and prep, get myself together, go and pack my Speedos because you done know I'm gonna be hitting that beach, swimming with the piggies on the beach, whatever beach it is that the pigs be swimming in that pristine, crystal clear water. I'll be swimming with the pigs too. I'll be floating with the pigs too, belly and all. I'll be floating with the pigs. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.
You've been listening to the Digiboss, Keron Rose. We hope your notepad was filled after this episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. The learning doesn't stop, folks. And to make sure you don't miss any gems from the Digiboss, go over and follow him on all social media platforms at Keron Rose. Folks, don't just sit there with a notepad. We need you to implement at least one thing into your business before the next episode. That's the only way your business levels up. Thanks for listening to Digipreneur FM. Now go be great.